Hi, I'm Nick Shell, and the fact that you're watching this video implies that you've seen me perform my most recently written song called It's Time to Start Another War. In this video, I'll explain what inspired me to write this song. Very straightforward lyrics, so I feel like I should just go ahead and start with the lyrics and then unpack anything from there if I need to. So here we go, the lyrics to It's Time to Start Another War. It's time to start another war, like the ones we did before. Who's next on our hit list? Who's calling who the terrorist? It's time to start another war. We'll need a motive we can all root for. Maybe out in Asia or the Middle East. Say we fight for freedom, we fight for peace. And then moving on to the first verse. What we need is another Vietnam. We don't have to win if we keep running long. Let history repeat Afghanistan. For 20 years we occupied that land and forgot we were still there. And then for the second verse, what we need is another foreign face, a different religion, a darker race, post-traumatic stress disorder in the making. Why help the world when instead we could be invading? We're running a business here. And then for the final fade out of the song, kind of like the bridge, never forget, never forget, never forget, never forget. We're the good guys. The Lord's on our side. We're the heroes. We're the heroes you should fear. There we go. There's the lyrics of it. Now, I will say what inspired this initially is, I'd say this is the year of really getting in touch with the music of Bob Dylan. So it's funny, silly as it sounds, every day I'm washing the dishes. I turn on YouTube and I just type in Bob Dylan, full album. And I've been becoming familiar with so many of his songs. And I realize now in hindsight, man, my musical style and so much of my perspective has trickled down from Bob Dylan through other bands and other artists, but ultimately Bob Dylan is a big part of my music, and now I understand that, and now I realize that. But in one of his songs, he has a line that says something like, we started a war. And I thought that'd be interesting if I wrote a song that's ultimately like a pitch meeting for why we should go ahead and start another war, why the United States government specifically should start another war. And so I feel, and I've been very clear about this in other videos, I'm not a political guy. I do not identify with one side or the other, just a neutral, politically neutral perspective. And I think too, we've had enough hindsight, we can look back at wars we've been involved in, and I would like to think we could learn something from that we don't make these same mistakes. But I feel like it's like a business decision. And of course me, what does my opinion matter in this? All I can do is write a song and say, hey, if there's anybody else who feels this way, here's some words you can relate to. So now I do want to, I guess, go back and kind of look through the lyrics here. Again, think of this as a pitch meeting on why we should have another war. And of course, obviously this is tongue in cheek. I'm not actually feeling this way literally. I'm putting myself in the position of people who, I guess, make the decision for us to go into war and make it seem like some kind of marketing meeting. So here we go. It's time to start another war. The fact that I'm saying that we're starting a war is really, I think the whole point of this song is that we're supposed to be the peacemakers. We're the police of the world in theory, but the fact that we would be starting a war. I think that's the main part of this song, like the ones we did before. I mean, even when you go back to World War II, at the time, Hawaii was not even a US state, it was a territory. But of course that was a strategic move in, how do you want to say, obtaining that state as our own. It was quite strategic, and so by it being attacked, it allowed our official entry into World War II. But then when you look back at Vietnam and you look at Afghanistan, you look in the situation where we're told to believe we're fighting for our freedom and we're fighting for peace. But then in hindsight, when you look back at all the innocent people we hurt on the other side who didn't want to be involved either way, they were just, as the saying goes, political pawns in the story. I mean, I feel like our nation fights against ideals that we fear that would hurt our own country. So then we go to war with those ideals. But the people we're actually fighting don't necessarily want to be fighting us, and we don't necessarily want to be fighting them. But we blindly adhere to what the marketing says. Hey, we're fighting for freedom. We're fighting for peace. This is what we need to do. But when we really think, what's the motive here? it's unclear a lot of times when we really start thinking through it logically. And so that's ultimately the chorus right there. And I'm saying we need a motive we can all root for, Asia or the Middle East, because I feel like that's pretty much how we get involved with wars. We pick a country in Asia or Middle East, and that serves as our motivation to justify a war. Going to the verses, I talk about Vietnam. I said, we don't have to win if we just keep running along. And that was ultimately how I see Vietnam. We were never necessarily trying to win. That wasn't the point. We were trying to keep our presence there to say, hey, we're fighting communism. Meanwhile, villages are being destroyed and innocent people are being killed, who again didn't care either way. They just wanted to survive. So, and then in Afghanistan, similar situation. And it really is interesting because about a year ago, we finally got out of there. We were there for 20 years, and people like me, I was like, oh, we're still doing that thing? We're still there? Oh, okay, yeah, I guess we're leaving now, okay. But the fact that we didn't even remember what was going on, like why we were there, so many questions. So it's all about the long game. I feel like that's what we do in wars, is we're just occupy for as long as we can, and we're just constantly at war, and we're ultimately initiating this. We have some kind of motive, but let's just hang out for a couple of decades. And then moving on to the second verse, what we need is another foreign face. I've referenced this many times in my videos, talking about on Netflix, there's the series called, Cracked Mirror, is that what it's called? And there's this episode where the US soldiers go to war, Black Mirror, that's the name of the show, Black Mirror. They go to war with this other country who look like us. So they're not a different necessarily race, not necessarily a different religion. And so they put this chip in the US soldiers' brains to perceive the enemies as being like these zombies who don't speak English, and they're like vicious and trying to attack them. But one of the chips malfunctions, and the soldier sees it's just people that look just like him and his own family, begging for mercy. But that chip kept the soldiers from being able to see that. And I feel like that was a lot of inspiration here. So what we need is another foreign face. We need someone to look different. And again, when you look at the wars we've been involved in, it's typically not Caucasian looking people. Typically, it's going to be Asian or Middle Eastern looking people specifically. So that's why I say what we need is another foreign face, a different religion, a darker race. I mean, I feel like that's the pattern we see here when we get involved in wars. A foreign face, a different religion, and a darker race. We can distance ourselves from they are different. We are fighting an enemy, and it's easy to look at that and perceive that, because that's scary too if they're a different religion. Surely God will be on our side because it's our religion against theirs to some degree. God's on our side, and I get to that in a minute. Post-traumatic stress disorder in the making. There I'm talking, and of course, please know this song is not criticizing American soldiers here. It's criticizing our involvement, which is a political decision from the government. And so what I'm actually saying, look what we're doing. We're creating post-traumatic stress disorder for our own soldiers, for our own men who are led to believe they're fighting for freedom. We're causing that post-traumatic stress disorder, making them think that we're fighting for freedom and peace, when really it's a political agenda. And then I say, why help the world when instead we could be invading? We're running a business here. And that's really how it feels. It feels like we're running a business, and that's what these wars are. And then lastly, when I do kind of the fade out, I say never forget. And of course, that's a saying that we think of September 11th, never forget. Well, guess what? We're never going to forget. Those of us who were alive and remember, we're not ever going to forget. But what I do is kind of turn the tone of this song, where it was kind of this upbeat song, and I created that song to have that tempo for a reason. It's kind of upbeat and uplifting, but really the lyrics are not. But it's because at the end, the final third of the song is ultimately a bridge, and it kind of turns into like a minor key. And I'm saying never forget. Oh, it's that political thing of September 11th, but really it's, well, what should we never forget? Never forget that we're the good guys, and the Lord is on our side. Of course, going back to that concept that we're fighting other religions, and it makes it okay. We're the heroes. We're the heroes you should fear. And the way I end this song, even on that E minor, that minor chord, to me, that final third of the song is the sobering moment of this song, when we realize we're trying to convince ourselves that we're the heroes, that we're the good guys, that the Lord's on our side, and we're fighting for freedom, and we're fighting for peace. Right? Like that's how the song ultimately ends. Can you relate to this message? This is how I feel. Again, it's not an anti-soldier message. It's when questioning our motives that our government chooses us to put our military in. Can anybody agree with me? I would love to hear from you. Your comments belong right there.